I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's block we call Hitchcock on a Train. All aboard the Grindhouse Institute Express as we ride the rails into the mind of Alfred Hitchcock. A favorite motif in several of his films, Hitchcock was able to showcase the scenic romanticism of train travel while juxtaposing it against mysterious and sometimes sinister narratives. Robert Hannay's London Vacation takes a sharp detour when he becomes involved with a mysterious spy who winds up dead. Blamed for her death, Hannay will need to elude his pursuers, convince a beautiful woman that he's innocent, and jog the memory of a vaudevillian performer in 1935's The 39 Steps. When the lovely Miss Froy vanishes without a trace, and no one else seems to remember her, Iris is left wondering whether or not the elderly governess ever existed at all. Was she real, or just a hallucination brought on by being hit on the head? Margaret Lockwood and Michael Redgrave star in The Lady Vanishes from 1938. Guy Haynes doesn't know what he's in for when he's unwittingly caught in a murderous plot with fellow train passenger and snappy dresser Bruno Anthony. Bruno's theory of swapping murders, crisscross, becomes reality, and Guy must clear his name. Farley Granger and Robert Walker star in 1951's Strangers on a Train. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. Each one has somebody that he'd like to get rid of. So, they swap murders. Your wife, my father. Crisscross.
All right, welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm your host, Brian Foster. With me, as always, is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
It's pronounced Froy, F-R-O-Y.
As you vanish halfway through the podcast. Today, again, a very special show. Today we are going to be talking about three Hitchcock films. We're dubbing this one Hitchcock on a Train.
Yeah.
Three films that trains play a definite prominent part of the storyline with three of these Hitchcock films. Two of them being, I think, the final of his British period, right? And then the third, he was in the U.S. at that time, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about The 39 Steps from 1935, The Lady Vanishes from 1938, and Strangers on a Train from 1951. Again, never saw any of them. The only thing that I'd seen about Strangers on a Train is what we were discussing the other week was throw Mama from the train. Crisscross.
I do your murder, you do mine. Crisscross. I love that montage and throw Mama from the train. I was, and when they got to that part of the movie, I was kind of expecting it to happen.
Yeah, exactly. You mean like running it over and over, or...
Right. Like it was like just playing on a loop in Danny DeVito's head as he's watching the movie. Crisscross. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the British period, I mean he did one more movie after Lady Vanishes. It's called Jamaica Inn, with very famous British actor and one-time director Charles Laughton.
Oh yeah.
Who his only directing credit was on Night of the Hunter.
Night of the Hunter?
Yeah, Night of the Hunter. You haven't seen it?
No.
Oh man, we need to watch that.
Okay, all right.
You're gonna like it. Don't look up anything about it. I think you're just gonna have to take my word for it.
That's really hard to do. I have a massive trigger finger when it comes to the internet and searching out things.
Yes. I love spoilers. What are you talking about? Yeah. But yeah, but it is toward the end of his British period. Hitchcock, of course, started in the silent movie era and, had sort of dozens of films there. And I think 39 Steps was one of the movies that helped kind of bring him into, being more of a recognized name. And he started to focus in on this genre. And, it was a commercial success. And especially Lady Vanishes, apparently, also was pretty famous. And then, due to the popularity, I think, of Lady Vanishes, he got his American contract, although he had to finish one more movie before he could leave.
But that was when David O. Selznick was like, why don't you come on over the pond and make movies over here?
Why don't you come over here and I will control everything about you and make you develop this crazy style that, you only film a certain number of frames so that someone can't cut your movie a different way. he started doing that with David L. Selznick. It was very weird, or at least that's the legend. I don't know if you could.
In order to save his creative vision, he would.
Yeah. Well, because so the first movie he did was Rebecca, which we talked about a little bit with Eileen Jones.
Yep.
Way back in insert episode name. I don't know.
Yeah. It was a Halloween one, right? Or an October one? Yeah.
Which apparently the way he was conceiving of it and, kind of directing it, it was supposed to be one way, and then they recut the shit out of it and turned it into something else. But it also won the Oscar and was kind of, famous and became kind of like this poison pill for him. But supposedly, out of that and some other experiences with L. Selznick, he developed this really particular style of just filming the things he needs and nothing more. So there's no other way to cut it, more or less. However, ironically, there are two different cuts of Strangers on a Train you can find.
Oh,
so
really?
The one that we probably both watched, it's, just the regular sort of American cut. There's another preview cut that is sometimes referred to as the British cut, which has a different ending. That they don't go back to the train. It's just the sort of girlfriend getting the call. What was her name? Not Pat Hitchcock. The other one, the other Morton daughter, the Ruth Roman character. Mm-hmm. She gets the call and it's like, okay, everything's fine. And then we end the movie there, as opposed to the sort of punchline at the very end of going back to the train. Like, hey, aren't you Guy Haynes?
The dreamscape ending.
Yeah, exactly.
I beg your pardon, but aren't you Guy Haynes?
39 Steps.
Yeah, we could start with 39 Steps here.
Yeah, we're already so deep into the other one.
No, that's great, yeah. This was the first time I had seen this. I know that this is a classic, or considered a classic by many. I know that Orson Welles himself considers this to be an absolute masterpiece, or considered it to be a masterpiece.
Right.
I feel like this movie is the start of all of the... what do you call it? Stranger in a Strange Land, escapist type films, where this basically just civilian ends up in some strange place and he just gets thrust into this crazy adventure. Very North by Northwest in a way. You could see the genesis of that. So this was very exciting to see.
The movie made right before this was The First Man Who Knew Too Much.
Right.
And you could see how obviously that was a rough draft for what became... the Jimmy Stewart version. And this one, like you said, it kind of feels like North by Northwest. It's like, hey, let's do that again, but we'll kind of ratchet everything up a notch. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because, just in the same way that Man Who Knew Too Much, he took sort of the same formula and reapplied it, but then, found a better way to do it. In this one, same deal. The woman that Robert Donat runs into on the train... he ends up running into and getting handcuffed to later. But in North by Northwest, he kind of did it the other way, which is instead of having that be a conflict, having them kind of get together off of that moment. Which, it feels like it's a better way to do it. I do definitely like how things didn't go according to his plan in this one.
When he tried to kiss her in the train car?
Yeah.
I was kind of glad that she put up a fight there and got him kind of busted. Because that is what would happen, other than getting his ass beat. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, there was cool. Those are those tropes that he was, introducing to the cinema world, and they're used all the time now. Things like that. The guy hiding behind someone kissing her, and
or the woman who got the knife in the back. I think that same gag was in North by Northwest. I mean, someone else got a knife in the back. I mean, it's like Cary Grant to the UN was like, oh.
Also, isn't that what happens to the French fellow in the remake of Man Who Knew Too Much? Yeah. And I think it's great because you feel like, in those scenes that knife must be in her back the whole time. Right. And by the end of the scene, she just kind of falls forward and then, the reveal of the knife.
Yeah, she had the perfect sense of drama to reveal where that knife was. But yeah, I think this one is a slight stretch on our theme here. It's like I feel like a lot of the train stuff is...
These progressively get more about trains as we go along.
Yes. Yeah. It's less of a focus on the movie. In fact, so originally I'd kind of was thinking about this block, and what I was thinking was, okay, Lady Vanishes, Stranger on a Train, and North by Northwest, and we found a much more interesting way to use North by Northwest with Bruce. So that one went away, and then I was like, okay, what else has a train in it? Oh yeah, 39 Steps, because it's pretty much North by Northwest. Although the way that North by Northwest makes it feel like it's more of a train movie is that we come back to the train in the end, whereas 39 Steps we don't. But
the 39 Steps has a really cool visual effect on the train when Robert Donat, when he leaves the train car from the window and comes back into the train car.
Oh,
and
yeah,
they had
yeah.
like the set of the train sitting there with a rear projection behind it of a train moving that I think he reused in Lady Vanishes. It's the same like effect that he put, or it might have been in Strangers on a Train. And it was like he used that same effect, but it was so...
Right.
Especially for the time. Like as a person in the 30s going to see this film, I'd have been blown away by that.
Right. It looks like he's about to get hit by the train coming the other way. Exactly. And you know, it's great because like a lot of the memorable set pieces are on the train in this one, and you know it kind of set up where he would be going with his his sort of like, you know, romantic approach to trains that Hitchcock has. You know,
he must have had some sort of fascination with you know, parlor entertainers or magicians. In this one, you've got Mr. Memory.
Am I right, sir?
Yeah, right. I just love that. You know, like I would have asked that guy something. You know, like what's the average weight of an elephant? And he'd have given me that weight. He'd been like, "Is that right, sir?" I'd be like, "Sure."
I guess so.
Yeah.
You tell me, dude.
Oh wait, I thought I'm supposed to have the answer first.
Yeah. He's able to convince anybody that he has the right answer. Like, you know, no one had any Wikipedia to look these things up, so they don't know. It's
just a good, confident answer, and that's the answer. But I like that he didn't, you know, let that be a one-off. It actually becomes part of the story, you know, and you've got with that one, you've got Mr. Memory. With the Lady Vanishes, you've got Senor Dopo, I think his name was, the magician.
Oh, right, the magician.
And
right.
so you've got like all those double-backed boxes and things that you can escape from, and that was it just made very cool sense for the stories that he was portraying.
Yeah, that guy's face was so great. The Senor Dopo or whatever. It just his like, you know, what do you want from me face? You know,
I don't remember her.
Maybe you don't understand. I mean the lady who looked after me when I was knocked out.
Perhaps it make you forget, eh?
But yeah, in 39 Steps, it was interesting. I'd kind of forgotten that Robert Donat was supposed to be Canadian.
Yeah.
In this, and it's like, you know, he doesn't really sound Canadian, but maybe that's how, you know, maybe he was just living there off and on. I guess we don't know too much about him.
Not much at all, and that's kind of what I liked about the character. He could have been anybody, and I think as a viewer, you can kind of put yourself more in someone that's not given too much information about. You know?
It's the everyman.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You don't stay here always.
No, I've taken a furnished flat. I'm only over here from Canada for a few months. By the way, am I allowed to know your name?
Smith?
All right.
But clearly, this is a time when spies were a hot ticket item or a storyline, because you know, these two first movies are all about spies and secret conspiracies, and
right. I mean,
I really love
sort
that.
of end of his British period was full of spies. I mean, it was like, you know, The Man Who Knew Too Much, 39 Steps, Secret Agent, which is the very next film, Sabotage is the next film after that, which has Sylvia Sidney in it as a young Sylvia Sidney. Juno, your caseworker.
Are you Juno, our caseworker?
Yes, I determine if help is needed, deserved, and available.
Are you available?
No.
There's a lot of spy stuff. I mean, you know, and then of course when he got here, the second movie he did was Foreign Correspondent, which is also you know, a spy movie, and then, you know, so he ended up doing a bunch of spy movies right around sort of World War II. In this case, these are all like, as we'll see with Lady Vanishes, like, you know, the spies and what they're doing. It's not clear which country and who they are. It's just, you know, it's some vague European nation. And it's
I think Lady Vanishes, they're in a fake European town
Yeah,
to start.
yeah.
You know, it's a fake name. Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to say, in terms of Hitchcock, you see from, you know, these earlier films to the, you know, the one that happened in the 50s and Strangers on a Train, what an improvement Between the 39 Steps and The Lady Vanishes, you've got, what, 3 years or probably 2.5 years, maybe? Yeah, 3 years between the two. And what an improvement between those two films, even though they are pretty similar. But you could see where he's just kind of taken like his craft. It has just improved so much. And specifically around the sound. I feel like, they were starting to obviously have real sound in film at this time. It was like a huge part of it. And he was using that more and more, and using it as plot devices, using music as plot devices and things like that. And
although there was sort of it wasn't like a full-on MacGuffin, but like he did have that tune stuck in his head with Mr. Memory,
right?
Robert Donat, that is, and so there was a little bit of that. But yeah, I know what you mean. Like the Lady Vanishes definitely was able to come to the next level, which is interesting because apparently the studio that he was making it with didn't want to give him a whole lot of resources to make the movie. Which is interesting, because supposedly he was starting to, get more and more acclaim and sort of more popular. And of course, Lady Vanishes became popular, but at the time, apparently they gave him their smallest studio and, it was less resources or whatever. But yeah, you're right. There is definitely what feels like a lot more sort of technique on display with Lady Vanishes and, or a lot more refinement, I should say.
Yes.
It's funny when I started Lady Vanishes, the first time I watched it, I was like, oh man, I'm not in the mood for a silent movie, because the first whatever it is, 5-6 minutes, it's completely silent. And in fact, when
with
they
the miniatures,
with the miniatures, and then we go into that little inn, and there's a bunch of people sitting around in a lobby of this hotel or inn or whatever, and some people come up to the front desk and kind of nod and are gesturing and all these things, and I was like, oh, is this going to be a silent movie the whole time? I didn't know what the hell it was. I was like, oh, it's Hitchcock. Okay, whatever. I'll watch it. But it wasn't until the door sort of blows open that we start hearing sound. I mean, other than sort of score for the first time. That's the first time we hear sort of diegetic sound. And,
right.
Even though you think about the movie and it's oh, it's all on a train, right? It's there's actually quite a bit of time, a good half an hour, almost 40 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Before we get on the train.
Right.
Yeah.
Setting up the
table setting.
The traveling females together, the friends.
Right.
I think Blanche is one of their names. I just remember that from the Golden Girls. But it's not totally on a train, but this one definitely takes whatever little bit of train business you had in 39 Steps and really makes a whole second and third act out of it.
Right, exactly.
Are you coming in to tea, sir?
I'll be right along.
I love how in the very beginning of 39 Steps, to go back to that for a second, we're at the sort of vaudeville stage. There's the commotion because, this woman just was firing a gun. We don't find out till later that, she was doing it just to create a diversion and get out of there. Mm-hmm. But there was that moment where the sort of stage manager was quick, get the orchestra to start playing to calm everyone down or whatever. Yeah. And there's something that almost the exact same gag happens in Raging Bull. I don't know if you remember, at one point there was this riot. Maybe it was when one of the fight decisions didn't go Jake's way, and it was obviously wrong, and the whole place started getting upset, and the guy was trying to get the national anthem to play or whatever, and try to calm the crowd down. It's not working.
I'm still shocked watching Hitchcock movies that how big he would think. And, he was thinking way outside of, some of the limitations that they had at the time in movies. And one of those being, the use of rear projection. One of those being the miniatures that he uses. He really uses them at the beginning of Lady Vanishes. I mean, you set up an entire town, that you're going into with this. But, there were some really interesting shots, very long or wide shots of up on a bridge that was clearly another miniature. Totally reminded me of Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. I don't know if you remember that one.
I mean, I've seen it, but yeah, I don't remember what you're talking about.
There are clear miniatures in it. That movie is from start to finish basically a big homage to cinema from every era and every decade. And there's one part of that where, Jonathan Harker, who's Keanu Reeves, terrible casting.
Whoa.
Yeah. He's reading from his diary or writing in his diary, and there's a miniature of a train that comes across. And it looked like exactly the same way. It had the same like motion, the smoke and everything. I was like, okay, clearly they were pulling.
Right.
But just to see how much this guy has inspired still blows me away. Because you see all the little bits and pieces from this movie are in stuff that you see today. It's incredible.
Right. Despite the fact that some of the, whatever story devices or even some of those like miniatures and rear screens, whatever, because the print we're watching is so clear and whatever, we're kind of like, seeing the sort of seams and edges and whatever.
Right.
Despite all that, there's so much stuff that's like really effective in this, and especially like when he goes to see I can't even remember what he was supposed to be, but there was some guy who lived in a mansion, and he's like, "Oh, what's the matter?" And he was like, "Yeah, there's a guy who's got like all these state secrets and whatever, and we've got to stop him. Yeah, is there anything, is there any distinguishing characteristic for this guy? Like, yeah, he's missing his thumb or whatever." He's like, "Are you sure it wasn't this finger?" So awesome. Oh shit.
Kind of reminded me of when we were watching Cloak and Dagger, and the person took off the glove and they were missing the two fingers, and that was the distinguishing
right
factor of that.
Yes, right. And Cloak and Dagger, I remember thinking that was like, oh, that's a very Hitchcock moment.
Yeah.
In Cloak and Dagger. Right. Yeah, I kind of forgotten about that. Yeah.
I also thought that the gag where Donut gets shot, but he survives because he had the Bible hymn in his breast pocket. But they kind of just grazed over it. Like they would make so much more of a big deal of it in movies today. There'd be like the moment where he'd pull it out and the bullet would be in there, and you'd get but in this one it was just like we cut back to that old couple at the farm. Oh, I gave him your jacket, but my Bible's in there, and that was kind of like the whole reveal of that one. But again, like something that's used today, and I thought it was strong.
I can't find my hymn book.
Where did you leave it?
In the breast pocket of my overcoat. It was hanging here.
Hitchcock has this really great ability to sort of ratchet things up and keep the sort of stakes and the story propelling, and like every time, Donut thinks he's safe, it turns out, oh no, he's being pulled up on stage, or oh no, there's this.
You have to give that impromptu speech. That was excellent.
Yeah. Or there's that one cop who was like, yeah, I believe you. We'll get this guy arrested and whatever. And it's like, God, thank God you guys are here. How long was I going to have to stall for this guy? And like, turns out the cop had like, what was that?
He's my best friend.
Yeah, exactly. The cop was just trying to like hold him there, and then then we kind of like cut to the outside of the building, and he's breaking out the window and running away, and like but then everywhere, every step of the way that there's like things kind of being ratcheted up, and like we're having all these like even in an early movie like this, we can see how he does suspense, and like that was one of the pieces on the train where it's like he's in that compartment with those two guys, he's like, can I see your newspaper? And he's like looking over the newspaper and like looking at the guy staring right back at him in kind of a creepy way. After they were just talking about like the different bras and whatever the guy was selling or whatever.
Put a pretty girl inside those, she needn't be ashamed of herself anywhere.
All right, bring it back to me when it's filled.
I will.
And then he like jumps off the train and like he's like where is this place and where's that place, and he's like trying to figure out whether he should stay on or get off, and like just the sort of nervousness and whatever, like you really felt that as the audience watching it, even though, again, this is a pretty early movie in his sort of suspense world like this.
And also, you're given, the title of the film, right? The 39 Steps. You're given that phrase right off the bat from, that first spy that he encounters, the first female.
Oh, yeah.
And throughout the entire movie, he brings it up a few times, but you never know what it is until the very last line of the movie.
Right,
you don't get clear on. I mean, you can kind of piece it together what it is, but it doesn't come out forthright and say,
right.
When Mr. Memory is about to die, and he just kind of gives the definition of the 39 steps. It's an organization of spies collecting information on behalf of the Foreign Office, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then,
that's what it was. And then he has the plans for the rocket or something.
And then he's the one that had the idea for a silent plane. like a silent
Yeah, yeah.
spy plane. I think that was like the big crux of it, right? But
Right at the end.
But it's cool that all that stuff is kind of just like hidden within a person's brain,
Right.
you know, like that's where it's where that information is locked. It's pretty interesting how he did that.
And just like, you know, a lot of the MacGuffins that he uses in his movies, like it's just such a perfect expression of that, which is that, like, it's this thing that is sort of propelling everything. It's a thing that, like, all of these other people are concerned with and you know, killing over and doing all these things, but the sort of main character and what that person wants, and therefore sort of what the audience is rooting for, has nothing to do with it. It's like they don't care about the specifics of it. It doesn't matter. Like, you don't need to explain the fucking midichlorian count. You know, it's just the thing that sort of propels the plot.
He had to fucking bring up the M word here.
Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells.
I've wanted to see all of these old Hitchcock movies for so long, especially this one because I've heard such good things about it. Of the three, not my favorite. I'm not saying I didn't love it, but it wasn't my favorite. I did love Strangers on a Train the most. But as we, you know, have done the show before, I feel like, you know, having these three films together, Strangers on a Train sits off on its own. It feels a lot darker. It feels a lot more sinister than the first two films. You know, I know that the lady vanishes. I mean, it's scary because this woman's kind of on her own, you know, and all of a sudden, Froy was her name?
Yeah,
when she just disappears, and now everyone's like, you know, no, you're crazy. You know, you got hit in the head with some sort of potted plant that got thrown out of a window, and so you're thinking fuzzy, you know.
and the sort of like immense conspiracy against her or whatever, you know, it's like
everyone was in on it.
You know, yeah, exactly. You as the audience are kind of pulling your hair out, and then like maybe I don't know. Was there a point? I mean, I've seen the movie so many times now that I don't even think about it. But like, was there a point where like you were starting to think, oh, maybe it was that she got hit on the head?
Yeah, that it was a dream, or that she that Froy wasn't around.
What I'm asking is like, was it fooling you as the audience? Like, or were you questioning that?
I was, up until they revealed the brain surgeon or the doctor, the surgeon that brought that body on, and I'm like, okay, you know, that was a little bit much. But I mean, but in the right way, you know, cinematically, they gave you that shot, you know, to kind of give you the clue, right? To as an audience member, you're participating at that point, and I was like, oh, that looks fishy. But other than that, yeah, I thought that it would have been a great twist if that was, you know, if Froy was never a real person. And then the two golf buddies from Dead of Night.
Yes. Charters and Caldecott or whatever.
Caldecott, yeah. Caldecott. Yeah. So we've had Michael Redgrave from Dead of Night, and then the two golfers, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
I forgot that Michael Redgrave is in this. I was like, it didn't dawn on me until like maybe like 3/4 of the way through the movie. I was like, wait, that's Michael Redgrave. What the hell?
What a fantastic actor. What an outstanding, smooth, like, presence on screen. Like, he was he was great in this.
Right. It's interesting because it's like the whole movie, it you know, obviously you kind of, in your mind, you're thinking of, like, thinking back on it, you're thinking, okay, it's this kind of thriller. It's, you know, like, you think about the shootout at the end maybe, or like all the mind games you're just talking about.
Yeah.
But throughout most of it, but then also, like, especially toward the beginning, there's a lot of comedy in it, and it feels like a screwball comedy, especially because it's like, you know, there's these two characters that you know, whatever, shouldn't be together, and like, you know, there's all these like little bizarre rules for what a screwball comedy is, and like, you know, it's like, you know, childless adults, you know, in this like, you know, madcap romance. And that's kind of what it felt like between the Margaret Lockwood and Michael Redgrave characters. Then you're also getting the sort of Charters and Caldecott characters that are like, you know, you're not sure what's supposed to be going on with those guys. They keep are so stressed out about what's happening in England, and it turns out they're only, they give a shit about his cricket.
Yeah. They wanted to watch a cricket match in Manchester or something. Yeah.
Right.
Which even at the end, I think that it got rained out. They didn't even get there, or there was no match.
Right after all that.
Yeah, that shootout at the end, that definitely would be played up now in a modern film, because at one point, the pair of those guys, Caldecott and whatever. He gets shot in the hand, and he hardly even like reacts to it. It's just kind of like,
I know, it's like you didn't even see what happens. Like you hear a gunshot, you see his face like not move. He like leaves the doorway, comes back into the train car, and like the camera tilts down. It's like,
like, are you okay?
Oh dearie me! There's a
you must be in shock because you didn't feel a thing. Oh man.
Look as if they mean business.
I was only aware of them as a comedy duo from this movie, and like when I saw them in Dead of Night, although I think it was just the two actors, they weren't supposed to be playing those two characters, I guess, but like
basically the same though, like feeding off of each other. Yeah,
right. Maybe we'll have to do another a Charters and Caldecott block, because they did a couple movies. They did kind of like a unofficial, not quite there remake of this movie called Night Train to Munich. Margaret Lockwood's also in that. And like the Cook's Tour. Anyway, a handful of other movies. They were really interesting, and in this one in particular, I feel like the audience, are you supposed to question whether or not they're a couple?
Oh, I was not.
Okay.
That would be really progressive for this time, right?
Think of how much disinterest they had for the, whatever she was, the Swedish maid, like changing in front of them and all this stuff. And like,
they were more pissed that they had to share the room with her.
Right. Now, I mean, I think you're supposed to just read that as like them thinking it's improper for someone to be in there or whatever. And that like, they're being inconvenienced by all this stuff. But, I think you're right. I think it's probably a little too early in cinema history to, have characters like that. Although it feels like that's also, potentially like they're trying to slip one, under the censors on that one.
Right. Interesting. I wouldn't put that past Hitch at all.
Yeah, exactly. That's his favorite thing to do.
I liked how they set up Michael Redgrave's character as an ethnomusicologist.
Yeah.
And he's introduced because he's has a bunch of people he's trying to like reverse engineer like folk songs. Like,
right.
And he's got
I don't know what
dancing.
The hell he's supposed to be doing with like writing in his diary about like, oh yeah, there's a step and then a kick and it's like what is he doing? How is he recording this?
I like that because it set him up as the expert in that field, which obviously that came back later. And then Mrs. Froy is also listening to that.
A busker.
Yes.
Right?
But I just love how all that stuff comes together. It really pushes forth that like little mysterious, MacGuffin, like you were saying, those pieces in there, those things that you're always chasing or, that you're wondering about.
In fact, like the tune and whatever, none of that was like really revealed until the sort of the very end. And you're like, okay, that makes sense now why there's such a crazy conspiracy and like the whatever the foul-mouthed woman with the high heels as a nun and all this stuff and like all that stuff.
She shouldn't be wearing heels. A lady of God.
There you go.
Yeah.
And and the doctor and all these other things. Yeah.
But when Miss Froy takes off into the forest at the end, I was laughing my ass. I'm like, go, get out of there, save yourself. She did so much. She's just kind of like hobbling away.
Yeah, she had kind of that Hobbit run. I guess she stayed fit with her cardio because that wasn't an obstacle for her.
In case I'm unlucky and you get through, I want you to take back a message. Oh, perhaps I'd better write it down.
The movie kind of hits everything that Hitchcock does well with the comedy and the suspense and like the whole MacGuffin thing and like even the sort of shootout in the end and like and sort of the romance story, I guess. It kind of touches on all of his strengths, and it just feels like it comes together in a fun way, and like it also has this ominous sense of Europe going to war and all this kind of stuff, like which in 1938 obviously that seems to be on the horizon here for especially the British, and the way that they were kind of imagining it there was more like World War I, where it's like, a duke in some other country that you've never heard of or whatever. It's like, that whole speech
right
from, what was that? Man Who Knew Too Much?
Man Who Knew Too Much, yeah.
Yeah, and like, essentially that idea was like, okay, in this place, in this country that may be Liechtenstein or maybe Faktenstein, it's like, there's something going on there, and there's like, a European country that wants this and that. Now, again, they're kind of imagining it the way that World War I started, but you could tell that it was sort of this anxiety that was in the back of everyone's mind at the time, or just sort of this free floating thing, because it was one of those things where everyone's like talking about, well, what about England, man? What about England? And it's like they're talking about cricket and not
right,
not the nation. Anyway, so it has sort of all those elements that make Hitchcock movies so enjoyable. I think maybe the one thing it might be missing is sort of the really, really dark villain, the way that you were talking about with Strangers on the Train with Bruno, or maybe even the in Psycho with Norman, or you name it. Like there's a handful of these really, really dark characters that he does so well that this one doesn't have. But I think sort of other than that, it sort of hits on all the Hitchcock strengths.
Yeah, this one's got. I would say that this one's got more of all of the Hitchcock stuff. Like he went for the dark and foreboding when it came to Strangers on a Train. Like that was a pretty scary film with a very intense ending. And I thought I was shocked to see that ending. That ending holds up so well on the carousel.
Yeah,
like I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
When that old amusement park worker or whatever he was,
was like crawling underneath.
Climbs underneath that thing, and I understand it's fake. I understand nothing's over him, but man, I was like, can you duck down a little further, man? Because you're gonna get the top of your head. You're gonna get scalped. It's like, dude, your whole back is gonna get like chopped off. But man, right. I mean, like, it could have been written or looked goofy, right? A stray bullet hits the guy, that's controlling the carousel. He hits the button or the lever, and the thing just starts going fast. It's almost like something out of Problem Child. You know, like it's something ridiculous. Although it's so good. And then that one little kid that was talking shit to Bruno and like kind of making fun of him, and he pushes him. He almost pushes him off. And like and previously in the movie when he like pops the kid's balloon, that reminded me of Inner Space with Mr. Odo or whatever his name is.
Right. I wonder if that's where he got it from. It's probably this movie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
God, and like and Robert Walker he's just so brilliant as Bruno.
But what a tragic life he had. He died right after this.
Right.
Only 31 years old due to, I guess, complications due to prescription drugs, which is a very current problem that we have today.
Right. Well, so supposedly, he'd been drinking really hard that night, and then like, I don't know, his nurse or somebody who was in the medical field was like, okay, here, just take this, it'll calm you down, and it calmed him all the way down.
Oh, Jesus, that's terrible.
Turned him off, and
because this guy as a villain, I think, could have gone on to be a superstar. Because this is a role I saw the genesis of Norman Bates in him. It was almost like an earlier Norman Bates that we got to see when he was actually dealing with his father, when the father was still alive. Even though his mother was like, calm down, Bruno, like, don't get crazy again. They kept referring to these past moments that he might have had. But man, like,
and he had kind of a moneyed background, like Norman did as well. Or Norman was kind of like, falling out of it a little bit, but like, anyway, it's
the worst kind of rich kid you could ever meet.
Yeah.
Especially like on a train
with affluenza, where human life is valueless to him or whatever, and
exactly. Not at all. I mean, it's like a game. It was all a game to him. I felt
right when he was like choking that woman at the party.
Holy God!
And then sees Pat Hitchcock over her shoulder or whatever.
How amazing was she in this?
I declare,
she was so cute, so funny.
I don't. Yeah.
Hilarious.
I'm afraid there'll be a lot of reporters at your front door in the morning.
Oh, Daddy doesn't mind a little scandal. He's a senator.
I love that. No, she was great. And it's one of those things where it's like, you wouldn't think, oh, that's the director's daughter, right? You wouldn't think, oh, okay, well, we have to excuse that one because it's the director's daughter.
No, she held her own.
She was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, she was incredible. Yeah. Everyone was great in this one.
No, exactly. I mean, Farley Granger, I think, this was after Rope, right? Rope's another one. Okay, so
that's the one take film.
Exactly. That's the kind of the one take gimmick thing. That the only thing I wanted to say about Rope, aside from the fact that it was connected to Farley Granger, was that like That one too had quite a bit of subtext about the two main characters being gay in that one. And so it kind of makes me wonder about the Lady Vanishes. I mean, and whether or not again, he was just trying to get away with something there. Farley Granger, I mean, even though he was also good in Rope, like he's really, really good in this one. And the guy, he's like, okay, Bruno, okay, buddy, yeah, good theory, all right, take it easy, man. And and then how it turns into him, just like just being a sweaty mess trying to get out of this thing the whole time. The scene where Guy Haynes, the tennis player, Farley Granger, was talking to his sort of current and estranged wife in the sort
Miriam.
of record listening room. And, she was twisting the screws on him. And, he just did such a good job of, having it feel like the walls are closing in on him. You could really see it in his eyes,
They really set her up as an awful person, didn't they?
They certainly did.
She was not only sleeping around, but she was pregnant with another man's baby. Or at least that was implied.
And
right?
how are you going to... No, I think it was...
Yeah, that was explicit, right?
Explicit,
they said
but they were like, how are you going to prove that it's not yours or whatever? And it's like... And what's interesting is like how they were able to sort of like get the two actresses to look kind of similar. Pat Hitchcock and I can't remember the actress's name, that Casey Rogers, yeah.
Which was the whole reason that he started strangling that woman, right? He saw Miriam in... Babs, was that her name?
Yeah. Babs.
Yeah. She saw, and then I thought that was a great turn for her too. Pat Hitchcock, when after she sees this happen, she has this moment where she's trying to explain to, Guy Haynes's new love, that her sister,
and
that this guy was strangling me. He was looking at me, and all of a sudden her whole persona is like.
You're right, yeah.
Oh, just really well done.
What's the matter, Barbara? Did you see it happen?
He looked at me. His hands were on her throat. And he was strangling me.
I should have guessed that this was the one that you would have really liked out of the bunch.
It's really great.
Because it's so dark in certain aspects, and like the way that he's exploring some of these things, which are sort of probably more taboo for the time, and you're able to kind of get away with it because he's supposed to be the bad guy. But just the sort of way that they don't like leave it on the surface. I mean, like the conversation, the sort of polite conversation that Bruno's having at that party where he kind of crashes the senator's party.
Yeah.
He gets in there and starts having these like conversations, like droll conversations about murder and like, well, how would you do the murder and blah, blah, blah. And
I think I would poison them.
Yeah.
He goes, now we're talking.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they have a very similar moment and sort of like idea in Rope. Only here, I feel like they take it a little bit darker, which is like to have him show up, start talking like a fucking weirdo at this party. Everyone's politely like putting up with him. And then, he goes and sits down with these old ladies, these old dowagers who are ready to like entertain this interesting oddball young man, and then he's like, "Here, let me just put my hands around your neck," and like he's like choking her until he passes out because he gets
right. I thought he was gonna kill her. I thought that's how that was gonna go down, and he was gonna have to like run for the hills or something after that. I thought that there was gonna be like a big chase at the end, but. He just barely got away with that one.
Well, I have the best way and the best tools. Let me show you what I mean. You don't mind if I borrow your neck for a moment, do you?
Well, if it's not for long.
I forgot how sort of brutal some of the sort of murders were in this, or I guess there's only one real murder.
Mm-hmm.
But, him choking those two women, one to death and one until he passed out. And then, like you're saying, like sort of the way it ended with the
yeah,
with him being crushed underneath that thing, and like,
right,
all sort of three of those scenes of 2 deaths and 1 attempted murder were handled, pretty dark, and it wasn't the usual. Let's put it this way, like there wasn't the same reaction that Caldecott had when he got his hand shot, where he's like, that's droll. I am now shot in the hand, or whatever. or the guy who's like, I'm a British subject, and he gets lit up outside the train. To me, his death felt like more like it was played for laughs, or like, oh, that's what you get for being a pacifist or whatever he was.
Right.
Is
that when he waved the white flag and got shot?
Yeah. Yeah. And in this one, all 3 of those scenes of death or near death were pretty brutal to sit through. It's like it was really uncomfortable.
Yeah, especially when he would see Miriam's face and it was constantly that replay of him strangling her at the Island of Love or whatever that was.
Yeah.
Where he'd bring the boats over. But, when he saw that in Pat Hitchcock's Glasses, they did that cool reflective visual effect where, he had that flashback. And it was interesting to see that he was, a very cold psychopath, I'll call him. But he was bothered by this stuff, like it did stick with him. So it did give him a sense of humanism, I guess. He wasn't such a cold killer.
He wasn't sort of full Norman Bates yet, where
or
it's
Michael
like he's
Myers,
able to exactly, like just cover it up and go along with. He was like very scheming, and
he had plans.
Didn't necessarily, it wasn't like he felt bad about killing this person, but. What is it? What is it that sort of made him pass out? It's like that. It's almost as if he had sort of like a psychosexual fantasy about this thing, and was sort of reliving it until it short circuited him or something. It's like this really interesting scene that like leaves you with some interesting questions about what's going on inside Bruno's head.
Yeah, I thought part of his rage was based on the fact that he held up his end of the bargain, or the bargain that he thought he made with Guy. However, there was no agreement. He's like, all right, well, I did yours, now you do mine. It's like, wait, what?
I mean, he had some very strong, like single white female energy. Like just like a little too obsessed. Who was it in that? It's Jennifer Jason Leigh in that one, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, he's got a little of that going on.
But like from the get-go, you meet this guy, and like from his costuming or his that strange tie pin that he's got that's got his name on it, it's almost
his, like,
childish.
We're watching his feet walk out on the platform and all these things.
Like a funny jacket or a funny shirt he's got on, and the stark contrast between
it's
him
like
and
my mother
Guy.
makes me wear it. Oh yeah, he's got mommy issues too, just
exactly,
like Norman Bates. Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot there, especially I just felt this was kind of like a version of Norman. We got to see like a different side of Norman, or a little bit more into his life.
Right, exactly. Who wrote the screenplay for Psycho? Joseph Stefano, is that right?
Sounds right.
Yeah, apparently like this is one of his favorite movies. And I guess you could kind of see, that there's sort of that archetype there in the Bruno character that he brought to the Norman character, like versus like the Norman that was in the book was supposedly a lot more like sort of Leatherface and like the sort of like hulking, monster type. And instead he put the sort of, it seems like he put a little of the Bruno character over top of the Norman character, by making him a little more, urbane, or just like, unassuming and like.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, unassuming and to the point where you'd almost be intrigued to talk to somebody like this.
Yeah. Well, and like sort of socially awkward. I mean, like, think about him at Bruno at the party, right? It's like he's very awkward, and like everyone had to kind of put up with him because they're like, well, what's going on here? And until he started like he found the sort of perfect audience with those dowagers, it's not as if people were sort of letting him off the hook. They were just like, yeah, this guy's a weirdo. Okay, buddy, take it easy.
I'm glad that they didn't let him off the hook. Like people were just like, oh, he's a normal guy. No, it was clear around the room that everyone saw that this guy was a little funky.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to bring up that great. I guess it's a twist, or it was more. Just Guy he took the map and I think it was a gun or a knife that Bruno sent to his house, And he's like, this is where my father's bedroom is. Go in at night and go kill him. And he goes in there, and then Bruno's just in bed, kind of like, hey, how are you? Were you going to warn my dad about this?
He was doing the George model pose or whatever.
The timeless art of seduction.
Exactly.
But that was great. I mean, he was a plotter. He was like a strategist. Like, he had this whole thing in his head, and it just made him all the more scary.
Right.
I couldn't believe the situation the guy was in, and that the family that he was going to marry into, had to deal with that. Right, the senator's daughter is who guy was with, but then he had to go explain this whole thing, and they're like, well, surely you were on a train, so that's your alibi, right? Well, they said I could have gotten on at Baltimore or somewhere in the Ranger, because it was all between D.C. basically is where this all took place.
Yeah, it was like New York to D.C. or something.
DuPont Circle is where a lot of it took place. Yeah, it was interesting because I was like, oh well, he was on a train, so he couldn't get busted. But Hitchcock or whoever wrote this was just writing out all of those alibis and crossing them off the list. Now we got to get this, we got to get this. So clearly it was written with some purpose.
Yeah, and I don't know how similar it is to the book, but it was based off of a Patricia Highsmith book, who also wrote Talented Mr. Ripley, or What Became Talented Mr. Ripley.
It's pretty late to start flirting with a discarded husband, especially when you're going to have another man's baby.
The train factors into it throughout the whole time, even though I guess we don't spend a whole lot of time on the train. But they do kind of, he's changing trains towards the climax and the very, very end.
It goes back to it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We kind of have it throughout. Yeah, I mean, in terms of how much train we got in this series, I think Strangers on the Train and Lady Vanishes are definitely the ones that take the cake on that. 39 Steps, a little bit of stretch.
Crisscross.
I wanted to bring up the intercutting between Guy playing in the tennis match and Bruno trying to stage the lighter.
Yes.
Right? I thought
the intercutting was him. He lost the lighter down the sewer,
right?
And he had
that's
to get
what
it back
was.
or whatever. Yeah.
Oh man, that was great. Yeah, all those. It was great how he did that, because you see Guy. Honestly, he looked like he was playing tennis. It was a really well shot tennis match. I was shocked. You could tell that there's some other people were in the wide shots, but either way, it was done really well. That kind of ratcheted up the intensity, because the stuff that Bruno was doing was just reaching, right? He wasn't doing much.
Yeah,
so you had this really crazy thing going on with the tennis,
moment, yeah.
And then we're back at Bruno, and he's just kind of reaching to get that thing. And you see every time they cut back to him reaching down, there's more and more people gathered around watching him do this. They're like, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you looking in the sewer?"
Right, exactly. And what's great is that. Yeah, the tennis match. It was oh, he's gonna make quick work of him or whatever, and we keep seeing how he's not making quick work of him. Oh no, shit!
40 love.
Yeah,
40-30.
And then we see the fingertips on the lighter, and he's barely getting it. That kind of speaks to Hitchcock's ability to make the audience care about the things that they ostensibly should be rooting against, which is they should be rooting for Bruno to be losing the lighter and not be able to frame Guy with that.
Interesting, yeah.
But while you're doing it, you're like, get it.
You're almost there.
You're almost there.
Just gonna grow your fingernails out a little bit. Yeah.
He does that so well in Frenzy, and also in Psycho, which you'll recall, especially when the car starts to sink and it gets 3/4 of the way down and stops.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh God, how is he going to get that down there? Yeah. But you should be rooting the other way around, for him to get
Norman.
caught.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, he does have a great knack of having the audience who, more or less are probably pretty innocent people. Or not criminally insane, to try to jump in the mind of these killers and to live through them.
Well, and to kind of adopt the killer's sort of point of view, which is what that whole lighter scene, suspense scene was. It's you are just as nervous for the lighter as you were when Robert Donat was being persecuted on the train and having to sweatily look up from the paper and see the guy across from him and oh, is that cop gonna help me? No. Oh no. You know what I mean? And it's you all of a sudden are this accomplice to
Right.
Bruno and what's happening with him. And it's the same with Norman and, some of the other movies he does where he takes on that the killer's persona.
Mm-hmm. I'm always rooting for Norman, though.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorites.
Because, he's pathetic and like everyone like treats him like shit and whatever.
Yeah.
You do kind of have some of that sympathy where it's like maybe the Bruno character you don't have as much, but
for Bruno, I don't think you have that sympathy because clearly, I mean, you don't really see what if his dad was really rude to him or terrible to him as he was growing up. They didn't really, even when they were together. I think it was only one scene you see him and his dad together. And it was he was just kind of a snot-nosed punk to his dad.
Sorry, Father. Long distance.
Right. Which kind of gives you the sense that, like, okay, maybe it's Bruno who's crazy.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is all in his head, and there's some slight that his dad did to him.
But Norman, you can kind of find, like, a comfort in that guy, or, like, some sort of softness to him that you're like, oh, maybe he could be changed. Maybe he could get out of this or something.
Well, and a lot of that has to do with, like, the fact that, at least in theory, you're supposed to not know that he is the sort of killer as well. Right. But also, like, there is this idea that, like, there are two people inside of him. One's the killer and one's the sort of, sad, pathetic, lonely person who's built his own cage or whatever. Yeah. I was born into mine.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I think, just overall with these movies, I mean, it gives the audience this appreciation for, like, trains and the way that Hitchcock, showcased them and kind of, like, made them, fun and interesting. It's like in pretty much every one of these movies, like, people are meeting strangers on a train and, like, and talking to one another and doing those kinds of things. I mean, I've taken a couple, cross-country train journeys and, at least
have you?
Once or twice, yeah, like,
cool.
Gotten to know some of the people on there and, stayed in touch or whatever. It isn't, luckily no one's, done my murder and I've had to do theirs, but...
Crisscross.
Crisscross. So far, so good.
Yeah, you have much more life ahead of you and many more trains.
Also, I haven't, had a train be pulled off into some, unknown European country and had a shootout at the end either. But, like, so far, there is something, like, so awesome about the idea of, like, train travel as depicted, especially in these movies. As a lot of things in the movies, they're sort of romanticizing all kinds of things that they show. Hitchcock and his trains are sort of no exception. But, that being said, like, there is something that's like, it's like especially looking at it now with, our 21st century eyes on, like, how we view mass travel, like, especially with, like, planes, whatever, like how stressful planes are, just like from everything, from the tight quarters you're in,
and you can't get
dry,
off.
horrible air. You can't get off. Everything's a danger. Everything's, like, awful. The experience going through security and,
Sucks.
all these things, like, whereas, like, in these movies, like, especially with the train travel, and even now with train travel, you just hop onto a train and, there isn't that sort of level of, a strip searching or whatever as you're going into it and, like, and like extra added stress of all these other things. When you think about how they're able to have these adventures on here, it makes them, like, so much more interesting, especially, like, Lady Vanishes, like, oh, we haven't had any stops. Now, in a plane, you'd never say that because it's like, well, what stops?
Yeah.
You wouldn't be doing that.
In fact, you're trying to avoid stops as much as possible.
Right,
They give you a non-stop option.
Yeah. Let's make this as fast as possible and as unenjoyable as possible.
Exactly. Pack them in like sardines, give them shitty food, and charge them a hell of a lot of money.
Whereas in a Hitchcock movie, you're ordering Gibsons and finding women who aren't particularly interested in the book they just started.
The food that they ordered in this, too, looked really good. And also, there was like the dining car, you know, where
Yeah,
Farley
exactly.
Granger sees that drunk guy that doesn't remember that he's on the train.
Right. Oh, the observation car. Exactly.
The observation car. Yeah. I just love that there's like another area you can go to, you know,
Right,
like
right.
it's actually like,
You can go stretch your legs and walk around. And
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's things to visit on the train, even when you're moving.
There's no seat belts. Yeah, exactly.
You can go to the shitter on the plane if you want. You know, you can ring the bell a couple times and maybe the flight attendant will talk to you, but that's about it. You might get a movie.
Right. Or you'll get somebody putting their feet up on your seat or whatever.
Yeah, or someone's kicking your
clipping
yeah.
their toenails while they're flying. Yeah, exactly.
Or someone that brings on we're going way into this, but someone that brings on their own food, like from McDonald's or something, and it just reeks the whole plane. Oh God.
Right.
Can't you eat nothing for a while? Yeah.
Yeah, there's no dining car to go to on a plane to have somebody deal with that.
And I mean, I think that just goes back to why it's so effective in these older films to, you know, like you said, romanticize this travel by train, and it also just adds a bit of, I don't know, drama, speed,
adventure,
adventure around the whole thing, because even when these people are having conversations, they're moving, you know, the background's going, wow, 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 you know, like, so there's like just something active happening all the time.
Yeah, or when you're sneaking on the outside of the train and, oh no, there's another train coming by.
that really sold. I thought that was great. Yeah.
It puckered up the butthole when you're watching that.
Got tight. I was making diamonds.
Can you imagine being able to smell a flower on the planet Mars?
All right, next week we will be talking about films that were, I guess, inspired by Groundhog Day. This genre that was created from Groundhog Day, this time loop genre, if you will.
A subgenre. Yeah,
a subgenre, yes. We'll be watching and talking about Groundhog Day from 1993, Edge of Tomorrow from 2014, and Palm Springs from 2020. These are all pretty different films, so this is going to be an exciting block.
Yeah, it's a cross-genre subgenre, I guess,
right.
type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels like, and perhaps there are some, precedents for a movie like Groundhog Day, but maybe not to that level of where we, see the loop over and over and over and over and over and over, and it's like doesn't break for the longest time. I know Edge of Tomorrow is very similar in that sense. But it'll be interesting to kind of like see the kind of subgenre this movie created.
Didn't you just say that? All right, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Ciao.
What is a life for two guys? Some people are better off dead.